Hi everyone and welcome to another episode. Our personal data is a very important asset that we possess, and a lot of people will be interested in getting their hands on this data because it will tell them everything they need to know about us. And in today's day and age where our lives are dictated to us by our phones and the internet has become an essential component of our lives, we share our data with lots of people even without us knowing. In this background, data privacy and data protection has become a big topic of discussion today. In this episode, I want to discuss 5 important facts about data protection laws and to consider whether these data protection laws are successful. Let's get started. Data protection laws have gained a lot of popularity over the last few years with the aim of regulating data usage and data collection, especially by online businesses, and thereby protecting data privacy. The most famous out of these laws is the GDPR, or the General Data Protection Regulation, passed by the European Union in May 2018. After this act was passed, many other countries have used this as a blueprint to pass their own data protection laws, which include countries like Brazil, Australia, India, Sri Lanka, just to name a few. So how do these data protection laws go about protecting our personal data? One of the most fundamental things that data protection laws try to achieve is data minimization. That is, to prevent data collectors from collecting data beyond what is necessary for their purposes. For example, my political affiliations or my faith are not data that is necessary for an online retailer to collect. Therefore, the law says that they cannot collect such data. Another obligation that is placed on the data collector is that they must ensure that the data that they collect is kept secure and confidential. That is, an obligation is created on the data collector to ensure that the data that they have collected is stored in a manner that will prevent or at least minimize the possibility of that data being hacked. Since we share so much of our data on different platforms, like our financial data on our banking apps, our fitness data on our health apps, our personal conversations on our chat apps, our photos and videos on our social media platforms, it's essential that these data collectors ensure that this data that we have shared with them is kept secure and confidential. Further, the laws place a responsibility on the data collectors to ensure that they are accountable for the data that they collect. This includes being upfront about the data that is being collected and for what purpose, and also reporting any loss of data to the relevant authorities. On the flip side, these data protection laws also provide certain rights to the data subjects, that is you and I, whose data is being collected. They give you the right to be informed when your data is being collected, so when an app or a service wants to collect any of your data, they must first seek your permission to collect such data. Further, you have the right to access your data, to rectify your data, to ask them to erase your data, or to ask them to stop processing your data. This gives you a lot more control of the data that you have given to these data collectors. So what these laws are trying to do is to allow us to take back control of the data we have shared with these data collectors. It also places an obligation on the data collectors to ensure that they have protocols in place to delete our data whenever we ask them to delete that data. And probably most importantly, these data protection laws imposes massive fines and punishments on these data collectors if they fail to abide by these regulations. So these data collectors will have to be far more vigilant to make sure that they collect the data within the guidelines and process the data only within the guidelines of the data protection laws. Now, the final question I want to ask is whether these data protection laws are successful in protecting our private data. The answer, unfortunately, is a little bit complicated. See, what the law does is that it places certain guidelines on the data collectors on how the data is to be collected and processed. But it does not prevent the data collectors from collecting our data and in fact processing that data. So provided we consent to these companies, there's nothing stopping these data collectors from collecting our data and processing our data. And therein lies the problem. We're so reliant on these companies, we feel like we can't survive without these companies, that we will voluntarily grant our data to these companies so that we can continue to use these services and these applications. So understanding what data protection laws are is only one part of the equation. The other part of the equation comes from us, the population, being educated on what we are surrendering and what the repercussions of our choices are. If we do this, the next time an app or a service asks to collect our data, we can make a more educated choice on whether to grant them that data or not. Anyway, that's been it for this episode. Don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you're interested in learning more about data protection law, check out the interview I did with Revan Veerasinghe on the subject matter. I'll see you in another episode. Take care.